Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar for agency social workers on meeting your registration requirements. I'm Kate O'Regan and I'm a company director at Social Work Employment Services, which I'll now refer to as SWES because it's a bit of a mouthful. I'm delighted to be joined by a number of panelists today and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Jess.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess McEwen. I work for Social Work England in the regional engagement team and I cover the East Midlands region. I am a social worker, I'm on the register, but obviously not practicing at the moment.
Thanks, Jess. Gavin.
Thanks, Kate. So yeah, I'm Gavin Morgan. I'm a social worker and I work for BASWA England, do a number of different things, including supporting regional branches and certain CPD events.
Andy.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Andy Gill and I'm a director of SWES, and I also have the privilege of also being chair of the BASWA England committee, and I have been a proud registered social worker for 35 years.
Thanks, Andy. Good for you. I'm catching up. I'm 32 this year, so there you go. Okay, so next slide, please. Sorry, the one after. So I'll just quickly run through what we're going to cover off today. So I'm going to start and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on our achievements to date since we launched SWES in August of last year. We'll then be having our main presentation from Jess, and she's going to be talking about achieving positive change in social work and maintaining your registration requirements. And then we'll hear from Gavin, who's going to talk to you about the benefits of BASWA membership, specifically in identifying a wide range of CPD opportunities. And Andy's then going to share some reflections and thoughts with us. And then at the end, we'll have a question and answer panel discussion. So please do use the chat feed. Do put any points in there, any feedback you want to give, any questions that you have. And you'll also note that there are 2 handouts which you'll be able to download for today's session. Next slide, please. So why did we set up SWES? Well, it was very much developed in response to member need, further to the implementation of the IR35 guidance, which came into force in April 2017 for public sector workers. And we knew very early on that there would be a significant impact on a big group of our membership. So we undertook a member survey of those affected and very early on heard quite a few negative stories, particularly of people's experiences of using umbrella companies, some of which could be described as a bit disreputable, offered very tax avoidance schemes and so on. And in a number of cases, members were faced with very large retrospective tax bills. So there was clearly a problem, and we got a very clear message that our members wanted a trusted umbrella company, which is professional and ethical, and that's why we set up SWES. Next slide, please. So SWES is completely unique as an umbrella company for a number of different reasons. Firstly, we're created and run by social workers for social workers. We're the only not-for-profit umbrella company in the UK. So any surplus that we make gets donated back to BASWA to support BASWA's membership services and improve recognition of the profession. We're bound by BASWA's Code of Ethics, which means that we're an ethical organisation. We're also the only UK umbrella company to have a formal recognition agreement with a union, and that's the Social Workers Union. And I'm really pleased to say that we're just about to appoint 2 SWES union representatives, and we'll then be able to undergo collective bargaining, which I think will really ensure that there's more assurance of workers' rights. Also, SWU are actually campaigning for agency social workers to raise their profile. And we're beginning to make a bit of a name for ourselves, which is great. We're getting quite a lot of national profile as a model of good practice. And we've been picked up by both the Trade Union Congress and an independent tax reform group as a potential blueprint for the future. So a model that other organisations should be following. Next slide, please. So what do we offer at SWES? Well, we very much see ourselves as being more than the average umbrella. And we want to offer, as the business grows and develops, a wide range of employment services to our employees. And I'm really keen to get feedback from you today about what you think it is that we should be offering. We also obviously offer PAYE and payroll services to ensure that all agency social workers receive the best returns from their contract, whilst enabling them also to plan for holiday and sick pay. By using SWES as an umbrella company, social workers have total reassurance and peace of mind. And I've talked about some of the negative practices that are out there. I just wanted to explain that wherever you work and whichever umbrella company you use, the tax code is going to be exactly the same. So the only difference is the set weekly fee. And we have a very competitive price of £15 a week, which is the lower end of the market. Other umbrella companies do sneak in extra admin fees. So that's something that's really worth looking for. I would also recommend that you use our payroll calculator. So that's on our website. It's really easy to use. You just put in your weekly wage and then it calculates your income for you. And if you're using an umbrella company that offers to pay you more, please be careful, because it's likely that they might not be compliant with the IR35 guidance and that you could face further sanctions down the line. Next slide, please. So if you're a SWES employee, you need to become a BASWA member, and we'll shortly be hearing from Gavin about the wide range of educational and professional development opportunities that being a BASWA member brings, as well as insurance cover. You can also choose to opt into SWU, and it's only £25 a year, and that will give you extra assurance. And SWES is fully accredited and audited by an independent organisation called Professional Passport, and they're the UK's largest independent assessor. So you can there's assurance that we deliver to the highest possible standards. We have a really easy to use digital platform which you can access from your mobile phone, and help and support is available via a 24/7 helpline. So you can contact us if you've got any concerns or queries anytime that you like. And we really have a commitment to looking after our employees. And I think that makes us really stand out from the crowd. We will care for you. I think that's really important to say as well. So final slide, please. So do find out more about SWES. There's a link there to our website. We have a really easy to complete callback form. So all you need to give is your name, your email and your mobile and a good time for us to call you. Alternatively, just pick up the phone. Thank you. I will take questions when we get to the Q&A panel. So I'm now going to hand over to Jess.
Thanks, Kate. So, as I said, my name's Jess McEwen. I work for Social Work England in the regional engagement team, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview and update around how to maintain your registration with Social Work England. Most of you will know all of this already because of course you will have been through the process of renewing your registration and submitting your CPD last year. So it's just a bit of a refresher, and then I'm also on hand to answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of a recap about what we do at Social Work England. So we are the regulator for all social workers in England. I'm not going to go through to it now, but once you get the slides, there's a little link there to a video that you can watch that just gives a brief outline of what we do. So as a regulator, our primary purpose is public protection. So it's up to us to maintain the register of social workers to make sure that all social workers in England are safe and effective and fit to practice. We've got about 100,000 social workers on the register at the moment, and social workers from all different kinds of sectors and with all different sorts of roles. So we recognise that not every social worker is employed within a local authority, which I think is often a bit of a misconception, but there's actually huge numbers of social workers that are either agency or independent or employed across other sectors. And there's no requirement to be a practicing social worker to be on the register. As long as you meet the renewal requirements, as long as you submit your CPD in line with the CPD requirements, it's fine for you to stay on the register even if you're taking a break from employment or decide to work in a different sector temporarily. So part of our role is to set the professional standards for social workers and maintain that register of who can practice. And we also handle concerns raised to us about the social worker's fitness to practice. If we receive a concern about a social worker, then we're looking at whether or not their practice has fallen short of those professional standards. And the professional standards apply to everybody on the register. Doesn't matter whether you're newly qualified or very senior. If you're on the register, you have to meet the professional standards. One of the things that makes us a little bit different from the previous regulator, which was the HCPC, is our CPD requirements. So we require all social workers to upload their CPD to their online accounts, and to do that every year because we work on an annual renewal cycle. And I'm just going to give you a reminder of how to do that in a few moments. We also set education and training standards for social work, which involves inspecting education providers and approving qualifying courses. And there's 2 post-qualifying courses that come under our remit currently, which is the AMP course and Best Interest Assessors, which is moving into the AMCP role. And I can provide an update on that another time if anyone's interested, because I haven't really got space within this slot. Next slide, please. So the social work register, which I've mentioned, under the HCPC, if anybody was registered with them, you had to renew every 2 years, but we've moved to an annual registration cycle. So every year, the renewals period runs from the 1st of September to the 30th of November. So if you want to stay on the register, you have to make sure that you've successfully submitted a renewal application by the 30th of November. If for any reason you don't submit that form, then you'll automatically be removed from the register using the procedure outlined in our rules. And then there's a fee that you have to pay to get back on the register. I think it's £135, and that's on top of your annual registration fee of £90. So it's really important to remember, have that deadline in mind. You need to get your renewal done by the end of November. And as part of that renewal, you need to have CPD in your account, and that has to be recorded in line with our requirements, which I'll go through in a moment. Thank you. Next slide. So the CPD requirements, it's just important to remind everyone that CPD is part of our professional standards. So there are 8 professional standards in total, and CPD is standard 4. So it's not seen as a bolt-on activity or something extra. It's there embedded within the professional standards themselves. So it's a really important part of every social worker's practice. And we talk about CPD as the reflection and learning activity that you undertake throughout your career with the purpose of maintaining and improving your practice. So the current requirement, so that's the requirements for this year, which ends on the 30th of November, you have to have a minimum of 1 piece of CPD in your online accounts. I think last year, the average number of pieces of CPD that was submitted was about 3.5. So lots of people did more than 1, and obviously would encourage you to submit more than 1 if you're able to, but 1 is the bare minimum. We talk about kind of 4 times per year as good practice, but that's not mandatory. As long as you've got your 1 piece in there, you're meeting the requirements for this year. There's no rule or requirement around what kind of CPD you should do. It just has to demonstrate reflection, and you need to be able to talk about how it's helped to improve your practice. And again, if you don't submit CPD, you're at risk of being removed from the register. So it's really important that you get your CPD done. And I'd recommend doing it within plenty of time. We know, I've got a graph, I haven't included it in this slide set, but we know that kind of as the year goes on, more and more people submit CPD until it gets to November, and then suddenly we have a huge spike. But if you leave it to the last minute and something happens in your personal life or professional life that makes it difficult to get that done, it just becomes very stressful, which I know, talking from personal experience. So if you can get it done early, then it just makes things a little bit easier for everybody. And then if you have any problems with either the system or not understanding the requirements fully, you've got time to check that out. Next slide, please. So when we talk about CPD, it's not just training. We know that actually from the audit we did of CPD that was submitted last year, lots of people decided to include training courses as evidence of their CPD, but that's absolutely not mandatory. It can be anything at all that has helped you to reflect on your learning and to improve your practice. So it can be anything from peer review to reading journal articles or articles in a professional magazine. It can be shadowing colleagues or discussing cases with colleagues. It can be attending online seminars or webinars, listening to podcasts, and anything else that allows you to reflect on your practice. So lots of people include supervision, for example, as evidence of their CPD. So just kind of have it in mind, it doesn't need to be formal training, doesn't need to be accredited. There's no particular number of hours attached to the CPD requirements. It's any activities that you're already doing to support your practice, because that's the key message, that we know this is stuff that social workers are doing anyway. It's part of our role as social workers to be reflective, to constantly kind of learn and adapt and change as the environment around us is changing. So it's just about being able to record that in your online accounts. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of information here about non-case holding social workers. So in response to some feedback we had last year, we've just developed some additional guidance on the website, which is how to meet the CPD requirements if you're not directly working with people, which applies to me in my current role, obviously applies to you, Gavin, as well. And so I'm not going to go through that in detail now, but there's a guidance document specifically around this on the website if that does apply to anybody here. Next slide, please. You may have seen that we are currently in the process of consulting about the CPD requirements for next year. So nothing's going to change this year up until November. The end of November, the CPD requirements remain the same. But after November, we're looking at making some incremental changes. And that's always been our ambition. So we know that getting to grips with a new system, getting to grips with a new regulator, in itself, that's quite a lot. So we purposefully set the minimum at 1 for the first couple of years, just to give people a chance to kind of get used to that. But we always imagined CPD as being a journey, and that was just the first part of the journey. So we're looking at how we can make some incremental changes to CPD. There are some consultation events running. I think there's only one date left, which is on Saturday morning. If anybody fancies attending that, then let me know. I'm pretty sure there are spaces still left on that. But as well as the consultation events, we've also got an online survey where you can give your views on all of the things that we're proposing. Once the consultation's finished, so at the end of August, we'll then pull together all of that information and then let you know if there are going to be any changes after November this year to the CPD requirements. Next slide, please. So just some key things to remember here. So remember that the deadline is the 30th of November. The renewal period opens in September, so at any point between the 1st of September and the 30th of November, you can log into your online accounts and you can complete your renewal form. You'll be pleased to know that, again, based on feedback from last year, we've adapted the renewal form to make it better at recognising people's job roles when they're not in fixed term employment with an employer. So you can now clearly state whether you're an agency or an independent worker, which should hopefully make that a bit easier for you to fill in. Something that's just worth bearing in mind is that the CPD that you submit has to have a date on it within the current registration period. So we get quite a lot of people that submit CPD records with dates outside of that period, and we have to contact them and ask them to change that, because it won't be recognised as being a valid piece of CPD unless it's recorded between, so for this year, the 1st of December 2020 and the 30th of November 2021. And just a reminder that the minimum requirement is one piece, but good practice would be to aim for a few more than that if possible, and about 4 times a year is good practice in our view. And CPD is unique to you. There's no correct way to do it. Make sure you're doing something that's relevant to your practice, that's interesting and of value to you, and how you do it is completely up to you. If you want some inspiration, we've got some examples on the website. There's video tutorials of how to fill in the CPD forms. There's loads of resources on there, so do have a look if you want to, and there's plenty more information that you can draw on to help you complete the CPD. Next slide, please. So that's it from me. So do stay in touch. I think my email address is on the first slide, and you've got access to the slide pack through the handouts tab. I can also pop my email address in the chat. If anybody wants to contact me directly with any queries, any questions, then please do so. If I can't help you, I can always pass you on to relevant colleagues who can. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and I'll be here for the rest of the session, so I can pick up any questions later on. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jess, for a really helpful overview. And just to encourage everyone, please put any questions for Jess in the chat. So we're going to hand over to Gavin now.
There's a mistake. I was on mute. Thanks, Kate. And Kate, if we can go to the first slide, that would be fantastic. So yeah, so I'm going to look at identifying the CPD opportunities, as the slide says, and I thought I'd just start with an image, if that's okay. And if we can just move to the next slide, please. There we go. So the last 18 months, as it's been, have presented a few challenges for us, and I thought I'd just start by showing you this image. Which is of me presenting to a national event, and there's me in the very same place that I'm sat now. But if you look just behind me, you'll see a face, and that is of my daughter, who's just turned 6, who thought it would be really funny to first of all look and see who else was in the room, who I was talking to, and then she proceeded to pick up a doll and start waving it behind me. Now, I think there would have been a point where I'd have been really embarrassed by that. But by this point, I think I got so used to things like this happening. I was just saying to people, you're just going to have to take me as you find me. And that's the reality. I think we've all been, found that in our journey over the last 18 months. And we've started to tolerate things we wouldn't have tolerated before. And we've been less embarrassed by things. But there is a kind of serious side to this as well. So, right at the beginning of the pandemic, I was speaking regularly to different members that we have in Basware, England, and beyond. And I've had a social worker say to me, because of social distancing, she was having to safeguard children through a window and try and assess what was going on through a window. I've been told about people running multi-agency meetings, trying to be very serious and professional, and then have their families and whoever else in the background making noise, and that kind of collision of personal and professional was really happening. And I also had a social worker working with a bereaved parent who was deaf, who struggled with some of the tech because of that. And she was saying what I would normally be doing at this point is giving her a hug, and I can't even do that because of social distancing. And that's where my kind of image here really is I can have a chuckle about it, but there's some very serious points to the learning that we've had over the last 18 months. And if we can just come to the next slide, please, Kate. So we created some products during this period. which kind of reflect some of the experiences social workers have had and try to fit in with some of the new ways of working that social workers have had. I mean, we know that so much has gone online, so much is happening digitally, and at BASWA we've had to move everything to digital platforms for us to be able to continue to deliver a service. And there's been some pluses, mainly pluses with that. Of course, there's been some challenges as well. Thinking back to where we were just before the pandemic, there was a few things that we had in mind. And I remember the national director for BASWA England, Mary Stratulis, was saying to me, we were planning some workshops. We were going to hold them at our offices in Birmingham. And then, of course, things changed. We weren't able to do it. We cancelled the whole series. And then we started to talk about what can we do to fill that gap? How can we do that? Because the big webinars that we do, we know they're very successful. They're really good, and they've been really good during this period. But we missed something as well. We missed social workers were, very quickly after our survey were telling us they were missing that human contact. They were missing that thing where they get to have those informal discussions. So we thought, how can we try and assist those to happen? How can we help social workers, our members, to make that happen? And so we started initially with what we call forums. We're calling them forums, where social workers could come together almost on a daily basis at the beginning of the pandemic and discuss some of the challenges they were having, and we could collectively look at solutions. Over time, what we did is we restructured those, particularly with the development of things like the professional support service, which filled part of that gap. And so you can see these top two images of forums. I mean, I'm calling them workshops now, so we have changed it ever so slightly. One is for children and families, one is for adults. And what happens there is we have up to 20 people each session, and we hold these on a regular basis, usually on Wednesdays. My colleague Liz Howard does the ones for adults. I do the one for children and families. I do mine fortnightly. She does hers weekly. And it's an opportunity for up to 20 social workers per session to come together, talk about some challenges in practice, talk about what the solutions might be. I'll sometimes show a case study where we might look at what the, how we might address working with a particular family that, in practice. And what we also have on the weeks that I'm not running those, I run something called Theory to Practice. And Theory to Practice is where we'll play a recording of something usually. And we've had people talking about experiences of accessing case files. We've had people demonstrating good online storytelling work with children. We've had someone talk about working with children affected by AIDS and HIV and working during pandemics. And someone else talking about her experience of final contact before her child was adopted. And in each of those things, once we've watched the video, we've then moved on to a thematic discussion, a discussion where we'll ask ourselves, how will we apply this to practice? And what I do with all three of those things is I take the Social Work England requirements for CPD, and I ask everybody to perhaps to complete those things as we go along. These are 1 hour contained events where we get to look at a particular issue in social work, and we look about how we might learn from it. And I say to everybody, always remember these three things. Think about how we might use the learning to improve our practice. Think about how we might use it to improve the practice of others in our organisations, and most importantly, how we might use it to make a positive difference to the outcomes for the people who receive our services. Because by doing those things, we've really hit some of the key things that makes for good CPD. And by the end of that session, if they've done what I've said, they'll have something that they can instantly then apply to upload to their Social Work England portal. The final bit here is the mentor service, and the mentor service is something it's very specific to looking for a job in social work. I can tie people in with a one-to-one mentor. You can also attend other workshops which look at tips for getting better CVs, interviews, and anything to do with getting a job in social work, whether it's your first job, your 100th job, or looking to move up the ladder. With all of these, they're BASWA England. The one-to-one mentor service you can only access if you're a member of Social Work England and part of BASWA England. But with all the other workshops that we have, although they're BASWA England focused, I will never turn anyone away who's from one of the other nations. But it is very specifically a member benefit. I think some of them we say you can attend if you pay a fee. So it's very much part, I would say it's something that you should access, a bit like gym membership. You can leave them, but if you take them, it'll make you stronger in your social work practice, and it'll keep you in touch with your profession. And also don't forget as well, we've got things like branches. Branches, we've had lots of independent social workers who form branches. They're a great way to hold events locally. They're a great way to campaign, and all of that can be part of your CPD journey as well. I would say good CPD, as well as hitting the 3 points that I've talked about, it's also trying to enjoy your CPD, enjoy your continuous professional development, because if you're invested in it, it makes it much easier to complete it, and you're not leaving it till the very last minute to do it. You're more likely to do it as you go along. So that's the kind of summary. Do come back, Kate, if you can take it to the next slide, please. So I'm happy for you to contact me individually. If you can't get hold of me individually, then you can contact us through our England address, and that's the way to also contact Liz, who runs the adult sessions. But again, as well, yeah, if you've got any specific questions, please do put them in the chat box, and I'll come back to them afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gavin. Okay, so over to you, Andy, to share some reflections.
Thanks, Kate, and I just wanted to acknowledge all the hard work and effort that Gavin and his team have put in around CPD. I mean, I've had the pleasure of participating in a number of those forums, and they're excellent. Also very passionate about the 80-20 campaign, which Gavin has been a real champion about, which is around creating more opportunity for reflection and creating more time actually for direct work with children and families. So take a look at the 80-20 campaign. And it's interesting what Gavin was saying a bit about how through the medium of Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever, we found out different things about individuals. So people who I'm presenting to or part of a Microsoft Teams meeting will know that I've got a very wacky dog, a border collie, that always likes to say hi, as well as 3 cats. So periodically I have a cat walking across the screen. But to be more serious, what I wanted to do was to take a few minutes really just to reflect a bit on my personal experience of being an agency worker, and to share 5 top tips that have held me in good stead in terms of getting the most out of being an agency worker and making it very much work for yourself. The first thing is there is an element of marketing. So I think you have to be clear about what you can offer to potential employees, and how best to sell yourself. So one of the things I've worked personally hard at and supported others with is a really good CV. And I think the first opening paragraph is just so important. A summary of who you are and what you offer is really important. The use of LinkedIn as a great networking tool that I've certainly found in terms of finding some very interesting work and connections with people. Have different irons in the fire, so don't, think a bit about the agencies or the companies that you're going to make a relationship with. You need to trust them, and that's the whole notion of trust is really important, and that you like the individuals that work for them, also very important. In selecting the roles, do your research, do your background reading, think about the local authority or the local authorities that you would like to work for. So I always look at Ofsted reports inevitably, but I also look at organisational information around that service that I'm thinking about. Does it fit what I'm able to offer? Do I feel comfortable working for that particular organisation? And similarly, do your work around umbrella organisations. Kate talked a bit about that. Typically, my experience is you get a long list of umbrella companies when you get your contract, and it's a bit of a minefield, really. I just found it very confusing, and that was at the heart around why I wanted to be involved in setting up SWES. Really, I really wanted to, because there are some charlatans out there, to be blunt. So I just felt it was really good to set up something that was really ethical, something that I could trust and my colleagues could trust. but also the added value and the added benefits that Kate very eloquently has talked about, particularly around CPD and professional development opportunities. Also very important. So the fifth one on the whole area of CPD, think a bit about the local authority or the organisation that you're going to as an agency worker, because certain organisations will limit the opportunity to get involved in training and workshops because you're an agency worker. You just got to get on and deliver the work. The more progressive local authorities, for instance, will include agency workers in the development and the delivery of their single practice approach. So I'm particularly passionate about signs of safety, and the organisations that I've been closely involved with have had a real commitment to engage positively with agency workers and make sure that they have similar, if not the same, training opportunities that permanent staff have. So I think in summary, do your background work, make sure that you've got a really good CV, that you're connected with good agencies and organisations that you feel comfortable with, build the trust, build the relationships, and think a bit about all the time, you know, what can I offer to the organisation? What are the skills that are open to that organisation? But also, what can I take from working with a local authority or another organisation in terms of my own professional development and meeting clearly the requirements of Social Work England? So I hope that was helpful, folks.
Thanks so much, Andy. We're now going to move on to the Q&A panel. And actually, I'm going to really neat segue, Andy, from one of your points that you made when you talked about the added value and benefit of agency workers using SWES. And we know, and we've talked a lot about it, about agency social workers facing specific challenges around CPD, access to supervision, and so on. So I just wanted to get the thoughts of the panelists on what wider employment services you think SWES should be offering its employees. Do you want to kick off, Andy?
Well, I think the whole space around CPD and professional development and support, one of the great things also, I think, within BASW, I believe we have a sort of mentoring and coaching service as well, because that's about developing self-reflection and getting support on how you can develop as a social worker. And within this broader definition of CPD that Jess talked about, that self-reflection, having some protected time to do the thinking, doing the workings out, if you like, you know, you need to note that, you need to log that, because that is how we develop ourselves and, you know, meet some of the key objectives that Gavin was saying, really around making a difference. So if we don't give ourselves enough time to do that work, we're not the best that we can be, I guess, in terms of the way that we practice. So I think BASW tries very much to try and create some safe space to encourage curiosity, which is an important skill, I think, around being a social worker, and develop the self, I guess, in terms of reflective learning.
Thanks, Andy, and I'll bring Gavin in a moment. But just to give another plug for the professional support service, which I'm involved in, it's a really fantastic opportunity. As you say, Andy, it's about carving out and creating reflective spaces for people's development, and you can access up to 3 coaching sessions for free. And I've looked at some of the feedback, and it's had a real transformational impact on people, actually. And so really do think about taking up the offer of the PSS. So, Gavin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kate, I mean, remember that BASWA membership means that you're part of a community of over 22,000 social workers with so much experience. And I was speaking to a member just about an hour ago, actually. He's an independent social worker. He was concerned that there's a child who's he's working with is having certain services taken from them, and he has to make an independent assessment. One of the questions I asked him when we were kind of reflecting on what was going on is, do you have supervision? And he said to me, he doesn't. And I've said, look, it's probably something that you should be exploring as a priority. And he is now going to, I've made reference to the, we have an independence directory where there are other social workers who are BASWA members who are offering themselves in that way. You can also network through our various groups that we have, including branches, to see if there's anybody you can have a mutual arrangement with. So just by being a member of BASWA, it's an opportunity there. And of course, with the workshops that I've talked about, there's an opportunity to have that reflective practice. We created the time and the space for people to be able to access that. So it doesn't replace supervision, but it can help work towards good supervision.
Thanks. Do you want to come in, Andy?
Yeah, no, I just, that's such an important thing, because that's so wrong on so many different fronts, isn't it, really, not getting supervisions and agency staff, because you're seeing a bit of a lesser being almost, really. So again, I know BASWA in terms of its advice and representation service, very powerful actually, and supportive of social workers who are in that situation. Plus, if they are in that situation, clearly, we're advocates of code of ethics, and also the fact that employer standards are not being met bluntly, that have been agreed across local authorities.
Absolutely. And just to pick up, we've taken a lot of feedback from the advice and representation about the impact of COVID, particularly on agency workers. And we saw that very, very early on. And that's why the Social Workers Union are leading this campaign. I'm going to bring Jess in there. Have you got any comments to make?
Yeah, so it's interesting listening to all the kind of support that you're able to offer to people. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to look at the CPD consultation yet in any detail, but one of the proposals that's in there is around peer reflection and peer discussions. So the proposal at the moment is that for each piece of CPD you record, you have a discussion around that learning with either your manager or with another registered social worker. And that's about talking about the impact that it might have on practice, what support you might need to be able to put that into your practice. And I think, as we've just said, the reality is that agency and independent social workers might have less opportunities to be able to meet that requirement. So being able to access things like one-to-one kind of coaching, mentoring, peer spaces where you can have those discussions, I think will be really helpful in meeting that requirement. If it does come in, it's only within the consultation at the moment, so it's not set in stone, but I know there's been quite a lot of support for it so far.
Thanks, Jess. And I know the independence networks have really taken off actually over the last year. So it's something that we might want to look at SWES, so setting up peer support networks for agency workers across the different regions and across the UK. So certainly something to take away there. Okay, so moving on to my next question. So I've talked a lot about the work we're trying to do to raise the profile of agency social work. And the next question for the panelists really is about how SWES should communicate what it's all about, and what are the best ways of reaching agency social workers across the UK. Andy, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, and it'd be good if we can get a bit of feedback going in the chat box around people's experience and reflections and answers, I guess, to those questions. I think for me, social media is a powerful tool for good and ill, actually, but is quite a good way of reaching out and communicating. And I know within SWES we've looked at different strategies around that. LinkedIn seems to be quite a powerful tool, I think, in terms of social workers as well as more senior managers, as a way of networking and looking and sharing opportunities for social work staff. So yeah, I think we need to use the existing platforms, but we just need to be hearing and responding to the, are we getting that right, and are we targeting the right audience in the right way, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And bearing in mind, actually, it's only in children's social care in England where we have got statistics. It's around 15% of the workforce are agency workers, which is quite interesting to reflect on. Gavin, any thoughts from you?
Yeah. So obviously now this is pre-pandemic, so things might have changed a bit since then. But it was once, I think we were in the Black Country branch event, and it was quite a successful event. Lots of people came, and the chair, Tonya, she asked everybody, who was here, because how did you find out about this event? And we had various hands up for Twitter, various hands up for what people had seen on the website and on e-bulletins. And interestingly, it was the basics, it's the old stuff. It was the word of mouth. That was the most popular way of getting the word around. And I think it's through recommendations. So I suppose we'll be looking to people in the audience, and we'll be asking our members to actually spread the word. So there's still something to be said about word of mouth. I know word of mouth might have changed ever so slightly in the way, because of the way we communicate, but there's still something about people giving that personal recommendation, and the voices around that.
I think you're absolutely right, Gavin, actually. Jess, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I'd completely agree, Gavin, and I think that we often make the mistake of relying too much on social media in terms of advertising opportunities, and I think actually there's a very large proportion of social workers on the register who don't use social media. So it tends to be, we find if we advertise a lot of things on social media, it's the same people that are attending, because we're drawing from that limited pool. And I'd say that for us, actually, working with BASWA has been essential in developing links with independent and agency social workers, because it's harder to kind of reach into those networks. It's much easier within established organisations, so we can go to the principal social workers networks for engagement with local authorities. But yeah, we've been really reliant on BASWA so far in terms of building those links, and we're keen to do further work on that. So if anybody's got any suggestions for me on how we can better link in with agency and independent social workers, I'd be really pleased to take any suggestions.
Thanks very much, Jess, and we'll certainly invite you back. I think SWES is very happy to be a connector between agency social workers and Social Work England. I'm just going to invite panelists to make a couple of final reflections. Gavin, do you want to go first? Any final thoughts that you might have?
Yeah, I think it's going back to that thing about enjoying your CPD. And enjoying and valuing your professional journey. And remember, your association is here for every step of the way, really, and make use of it. Come back to us, and if you're not sure about how you best do that, I'm happy to sort of speak to you individually if you want to email me to look at that. And so yeah, enjoy it, get involved in the branches, book onto some of our workshops, and contact us in relation to the mentor service.
Thanks very much, Gavin. Andy?
Yeah, I'll just reinforce what Gavin was saying, so it's some really important points. I think for me, being an agency where don't just react to an opportunity, think about that opportunity. Does that actually meet what I'm interested in, what I'm trying to develop in terms of my own skills? And think a bit about the context of that organization as well, because if you're going into an organization that's just had, for instance, an inadequate Ofsted inspection, that's going to be very different from going into an organization that is being judged outstanding. Think about that. Think about how you would manage some of those stresses and pressures. But I think the great thing about agency work is the diversity. It creates a lot of different opportunities for social work practice development, as well as development of you as an individual in terms of your career. So to be able to show an employer, if you decide to go permanent, that you've had a range of different experiences, you've worked a bit of a career path out, you're going to stand really a good chance actually of getting the job ultimately that you want to achieve.
Thanks, Andy. Some really good reflections there. And something certainly I've seen is that a lot of people use agency work to transition out of a work environment that isn't great. We talk a lot about working conditions at BASWA. So I think you're right to make that connection about it being very often an opportunity, particularly to go maybe into a different area of practice. Jess, any final reflections from you?
Not a reflection, but I just wanted to pick up, I spotted a question that somebody had asked further up in the chat about whether or not there'll be both the structured and the unstructured form available next year for recording CPD. At the moment, the proposal is to merge those forms, so just to have one type of form. That's included within the consultation that's running at the moment, so have a look at that. If you come to the event on Saturday, we can show you a demo of that form, or if not, it's available within the consultation documents. And it proposes that you have one form that's kind of a hybrid model, so you've got some specific boxes within there to talk about reflection and impact, but you can write, it's more like the unstructured form in terms of writing free text under those sections, but it's only a proposal at the moment. We're really keen to hear people's thoughts. If you like it or don't like it, then please let us know. In terms of overall reflections, I'm not sure I've got much to add actually, apart from what Gavin and Andy have said. Other than I think sometimes agency workers do have a difficult time of it in terms of making sure they get adequate support, supervision, opportunities. Please use the social work England requirements to help you fight for those. So if you're based within an organisation that's not giving you access to opportunities, then tell people I've got to do this to meet my CPD requirements to stay on the register, and you can use that as a kind of alongside the employer standards that exist. You can use that to try and kind of get what you need from the places that you're working within.
Thanks so much, Jess. And also just to say there that what we found at BASWA is that going digital has helped us to engage with our members in a very different way, and that most of our webinars and online events are recorded, so you can watch them at any time. So do make use of that. I wanted to say a huge thank you to our panelists. I think it's been a really interesting discussion today. I'm going to bring to a close our first SWES webinar. I'm hoping that it's going to be the first of many, and I look forward to seeing you all again sometime soon. And just drop me an email if there's anything that you'd like to discuss or any feedback that you'd like to give about SWES. So thank you all very much and have a great evening.
Thanks, Kate.